So let's talk about that. So let's say somebody's doing their first marathon, but we can obviously compare it to somebody that's done, say, 3 or 4 marathons. It's quite a difficult question, but how far out should your training start?
Yeah.
Answer that first. The second question will be, you see programs where they're running 4 times a week. You see programs where they're running 6 times a week.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around that as well? So first of all, how far out should you start?
I think the how far out's really interesting. The classic online program you'll download or get from London Marathon's website will be 16 weeks. And I don't know where that number came from, but it just is. And it sort of works. You sort of have 4 to 6 week base, 7 or 8 weeks in the middle, and then a taper, basically. And for most people, that will be okay. But if you're coming into that off of no running, that's probably not long enough.
No.
Because week 1 is going to have somewhere between 20 and 40 kilometers or 50.
That's a big jump from sitting on a couch to...
It's a huge jump. Yeah. So for that person, you might say, realistically, if that's the program you're going to take on, you need another 4 to 8 weeks before that. Forget the program. Just get yourself used to running.
And that could just be as simple as doing the couch to 5K.
Exactly that. I think you've got to get yourself, for me, couch to 5K would be a great start. Then you might, they do a 5 to 10K program as well. You might do that. And I think if you can run 10K reasonably comfortably, that gives you a nice base to then take on a 16-week program. There will be plenty of people out there that will take on a 12-week program or a 14-week program. And if you're writing your own, there's no set amount. It doesn't have to be. But I think if you are, like I said, if you're running sort of 30K plus a week consistently, then you're ready to start probably a 16-week program. If you're running maybe 40 or 50K a week, then you could probably look at a shorter program of maybe 12 to 14 weeks.
And obviously lots of people on the London Marathon, it is their first, and they're not runners generally. And I think that's the problem, isn't it, with the general programs, is it gives you this impression that anybody can do a marathon in 16 weeks. But it's very different if you've never run before. And obviously we in the clinic, we see loads of these injuries. First time runners, they start it in December sometime, first week of January, they're booking in with a knee problem. Because they've just upped their mileage too quickly.
Just too quickly. And you're right. I think the reality is for every person that you see on that start line who coped with the 16-week program, clinics like ours have probably seen 2 or 3 people that didn't cope with that program, basically. And then frequency. So I would say it will be for novices somewhere between 3 and 6 runs a week, really. And I do think you can train for a marathon of 3 runs a week, but I wouldn't necessarily, personally, I wouldn't advise it. And my reasoning for that is your week will look like 2 midweek runs of between 5 and 10K on most plans, and then an ever-increasing weekend long run, which at some point essentially might be up towards 30K, which means you're doing 60% of your weekly mileage. Let's say you do 10K Tuesday, 10K Thursday, and 30K
on one day. You're doing a huge amount.
You're doing 60% of your mileage, and as a general rule of thumb, your long run should maybe make up about 30 to 40% of your weekly mileage. There's no real research behind that.
Sure.
Just a bit of a
but from your experience of coaching people,
it's just a coaching rule of thumb. So there are ways you get around that. If you really, some people's bodies don't cope with doing longer or more runs, so they might do a mixture of cross training. So you might do 3 runs, a bike, and a cross trainer session. At least you're still getting some aerobic work, and you're building that energy system. But I think if you can cope with 4 or 5, and that's one of the early things to prepare for as well, is if you're looking at a plan that's going to run 5 times a week, you need to start preparing your body for 5 times a week. There's no point doing 2 runs a week in the build-up and then suddenly jump into a plan that's 5 runs a week, because it's, again, a huge shock to the body. So I think 4 or 5 runs would allow you to prepare really well for a marathon. But like I said, you can get there on 3, and some people will obviously do more. But I think if you're at that lower end, supplementing it with cross training is probably a way to keep your sort of workload high, so your weekend.
And certainly if you start 20 weeks out, that just sort of little and often can be a really sort of good start for it. And the thing is, what you're saying there in terms of how many runs you do, you know, some of those, I remember when I was doing it, some of the runs, like on a Tuesday night, was just a 3K run, you know, just slightly quicker than marathon pace. But every training that you do or every session you do does have a role, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it should do.
It should have a role.
You should understand that in your plan as well.